So there's a part of this Israel-Iran thing that I think most of you haven't heard yet. The defense minister of Israel publicly admitted they want to hit Iran's energy sector, but they're not doing it. Why? Because the United States said no. And the reason why, that's what I want to walk you through. Before I get into it, drop the country you're watching from in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where everyone's tuning in from today. I read them. So there's a part of this Israel-Iran thing that I think most of you haven't heard yet. The defense minister of Israel publicly admitted they want to hit Iran's energy sector, but they're not doing it. Why? Because the United States said no. And the reason why, that's what I want to walk you through. This isn't some leaked rumor or a back-channel whisper. This was the Israeli defense minister, Israel Katz, standing up and telling the world flat out that his military is ready to strike Iranian energy infrastructure, oil refineries, power plants, the stuff that keeps the Iranian economy breathing. He said the IDF has already been instructed to prepare for a potential independent strike. That's a big deal. And then he added that if Iran fires on Israel, they will respond with full force. No ambiguity, no diplomatic wiggle room. But here's where it gets complicated. He also said they're holding back right now on purpose. And the reason is the United States. Washington has effectively put a hand on Israel's shoulder and said, not yet. Don't do it. Now ask yourself, since when does Israel listen to anyone when it comes to their own security? Since when do they publicly admit they're being restrained? The United States is worried about a global oil crisis. That's the official line. The White House is reportedly concerned that if Israel strikes Iran's energy infrastructure, Tehran won't just absorb the hit and move on. They'll retaliate. And not just against Israel. They'll go after neighboring countries. They'll threaten the Strait of Hormuz. They'll launch missiles at Saudi oil fields. They'll do whatever it takes to make the entire region bleed oil. And that would send crude prices through the roof. Think about what that means. Global inflation, supply chain chaos, pump prices in the United States hitting numbers that would make the 1970s oil embargo look like a minor inconvenience. And we're not even talking about the potential for a wider war that drags in the Gulf states, maybe even U.S. forces. So the Biden administration, or whoever's sitting in the White House right now, is looking at this and saying, we can't afford that. Not right now. But here's the thing. That's the surface level explanation. That's what they're telling the press. That's not the whole reason. I spent the morning going back through exactly what's been happening between these two countries over the last few months. And the more I read, the more I realized this whole thing was building for a long time. So let me take you back for a second. For months, there have been tit-for-tat strikes between Israel and Iran. Shadow wars, cyber attacks, assassinations of nuclear scientists, strikes on Iranian military advisors in Syria. It's been this slow burn conflict that never quite exploded into open, direct warfare. But the pressure's been building. Every time Israel hits a target, Iran vows revenge. Every time Iran threatens, Israel upgrades its capabilities. It's been a dance, a violent, dangerous dance. And then things started changing. A few weeks ago, Iran launched a massive missile and drone attack directly at Israeli territory. Not through proxies, not from Lebanon, from Iran itself. Hundreds of projectiles. And Israel, with help from the US and allies, intercepted most of them. But the message was loud and clear. Iran is willing to go direct. That changed the equation in a way I don't think people fully grasped at the time. Israel's response at first was what some called measured. They hit a few military targets. They sent a message without escalating too far. But inside the Israeli government, the debate was fierce. There was a faction, a big one, that wanted to hit Iran where it really hurts. Not military bases, not missile silos, the economy, the energy infrastructure, the thing that keeps the regime in power. And now we know that faction is led by the defense minister himself. Israel Katz said the quiet part out loud. He confirmed that Israel has the capacity to strike these facilities. He said the military has been instructed to prepare. That's not hypothetical. That's a military order being issued. The only reason they haven't pulled the trigger is that Washington is leaning on them. Hard. But let's not pretend Israel is just a puppet on a string here. They're not. They have their own security calculus, their own red lines, and their own sense of what's necessary for their survival. So the real question isn't whether they want to do it. The question is, what happens if they decide they don't care what the U.S. wants anymore? That's the question that keeps people in Washington up at night. And here's where I get genuinely frustrated. The coverage of this has been so surface level. Most headlines just say, Israel wants to strike Iran, U.S. says no. And people read that and they think, okay, it's a disagreement between allies. They'll work it out. No. No, no, no. This is a fundamental clash of interests. The U.S. is looking at global markets. The U.S. is looking at election cycles. The U.S. is looking at the potential for a regional war that would drag in its own forces. Israel is looking at a nuclear program that they believe is just months away from producing a weapon. They're looking at a regime that has repeatedly called for their destruction. They're looking at their own citizens who are scared to go to work, to send their kids to school. So when the U.S. says, don't do it because of oil, Israel is hearing, we value your security less than we value global oil prices. Now, I'm not saying that's fair. I'm not saying that's what Washington means. But I am saying that's what it looks like from Tel Aviv. And that's dangerous. Let me explain something about Israel's strategic culture. This isn't a country that outsources its security. Ever. They have a doctrine. It's called the Begin Doctrine, named after former Prime Minister Menachem Begin. The idea is that Israel will never allow its enemies to acquire weapons of mass destruction. They've acted on this before. They bombed the Osirak nuclear reactor in Iraq in 1981. They bombed a reactor in Syria in 2007. They've conducted countless covert operations to sabotage Iran's nuclear program, including the Stuxnet virus. So when they say they're prepared to strike Iran's energy infrastructure, that's not a bluff. That's a statement of intent. They've done it before in different forms, and they'll do it again. The only question is timing and circumstances. And here's the detail most networks are missing. Defense Minister Katz didn't just say they're ready. He said they're currently holding back due to U.S. disapproval. That word currently is doing a lot of heavy lifting. It implies a temporary state, not a permanent one, which means the moment the U.S. loses leverage, or the moment Israel feels they've run out of other options, they're going to go. So what happens if they do? Let's run the scenario. Israel sends in F-35s, maybe some missiles, and they hit a refinery, a power plant, maybe a port. Iran's energy sector is not monolithic. It's got facilities scattered across the country. But some are in the south near the Persian Gulf, others near the coast of the Caspian Sea. The biggest one is the Abadan refinery. That thing processes hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil a day. If that goes up in flames, it's not just a black eye for Tehran. It's a serious economic blow. Iran's response? They don't just sit there. They've got ballistic missiles, they've got drones, they've got proxies in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. They can launch a coordinated attack on Israeli cities, on U.S. bases in the region, on Saudi oil infrastructure. They can mine the Strait of Hormuz. They can shut down the entire flow of oil from the Gulf. That's the nightmare scenario. That's what the U.S. is trying to avoid. And here's the really scary part. Iran could also decide to use this as a pretext to break out toward a nuclear weapon. They've been enriching uranium at high levels for a while now. They've got centrifuges spinning. They've got the knowledge. If they're under attack, if they feel their regime is threatened, they might just say, to hell with it, and go for the bomb. And then we have a nuclear-armed Iran, which is the very thing Israel is trying to prevent by bombing their energy facilities. See the loop? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Israel strikes to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and Iran uses that strike to justify getting a nuclear weapon. So what does the United States do in that scenario? That's the $64,000 question. The Biden administration, or whoever's in charge, has to choose between backing their ally and preventing a global catastrophe. And if you think that's an easy choice, you haven't been paying attention to how fractured this relationship has become. There's a deep, growing distrust between Washington and Jerusalem. It's been brewing for a while on issues like settlements, on Palestinian statehood, on how aggressively to confront Iran. The U.S. wants diplomacy. Israel wants action. The U.S. wants to talk. Israel wants to bomb. It's like watching two people in a marriage who can't agree on how to discipline their kid, except the kid has ballistic missiles. And now we're at the point where the Israeli defense minister is publicly admitting to this gap. That's not normal. Usually, these disagreements happen behind closed doors. The Israeli leader says something to the American ambassador. The American president sends a stern message. It stays private. But Katz went public. He put it out there. Why? I think he did it intentionally. I think he wanted the American people to know. He wanted you to know that Israel's hands are tied by Washington. He's building a case. He's saying, we would have solved this problem by now if it weren't for the Americans. It's a political move, a dangerous one. And it's working. Look at the comments on any article about this. You've got people on the right saying, let Israel do what it needs to do. You've got people on the left saying, this is reckless and will start a war. The debate has shifted. It's no longer, should Israel strike Iran? It's, should the U.S. stop them? That's exactly what Katz wanted. Now let's talk about the international reaction, because it's not just the U.S. and Israel in this room. The Gulf states are watching this very closely. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, they have their own issues with Iran. They see Iran as a rival, a threat. But they also don't want a war on their doorstep, a war that would disrupt their own oil exports, a war that could turn into a regional firestorm. So they're quietly telling the U.S., please, for the love of God, keep Israel on a leash. And then there's Europe. They're usually on the sidelines with stuff like this, but not this time. Because Europe is still dealing with the energy crisis caused by the war in Ukraine. They're still trying to wean themselves off Russian gas. They cannot afford another energy shock. If the Persian Gulf gets blocked, if oil hits $200 a barrel, the European economy goes into a tailspin. Factories shut down. People can't heat their homes. It's a political disaster waiting to happen. So the U.S. is getting pressure from all sides. Europe is saying, don't let this happen. The Gulf is saying, don't let this happen. The American oil and gas industry is saying, don't let this happen because we don't need the competition or the chaos. And Israel is saying, we don't care, we have to protect ourselves. But here's the thing about pressure. When you squeeze a balloon on one side, it pops out on the other. Let me give you the timeline. Sometime in the next few weeks, Israel is going to make a decision. They've been instructed to prepare. Preparation takes time. Intelligence gathering, mission planning, target selection. but they're not going to wait forever. The moment they feel that the diplomatic window has closed, or the moment Iran crosses a new red line, they're going to go. And the U.S. will have a choice. They can try to stop them, which is a massive military operation in its own right. Or they can let them go and try to manage the aftermath. Or, and this is the one nobody's talking about, they can assist them. They can join the operation and try to contain the retaliation. That would be a huge escalation. That would be the United States and Israel attacking Iran together in an open war. Do I think that's likely? No. But I also didn't think we'd be where we are right now. And I've learned to stop underestimating how fast things can go sideways. Let's talk about the Israeli domestic scene for a second, because that's another thing the headlines are missing. Israel is divided, deeply divided. They've had massive protests over judicial reforms. They've had political instability. And the Netanyahu government is under constant pressure to look strong on security. They're fighting a multi-front war. They're dealing with Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, and Iran pulling the strings from behind the scenes. So for the Israeli government, a strike on Iran's energy infrastructure isn't just about Iran. It's about reestablishing deterrence. It's about saying to every enemy, you are not safe. We can reach you. We can hurt you, and we will. It's a message, and sometimes the message is more important than the actual target. And that's why I think the threat is real, because the Israeli government needs a win. They need to show the Israeli public that they are doing something, anything, to stop Iran from getting a bomb, even if it risks a war, even if it strains the U.S. relationship, even if it sends oil prices skyrocketing, because the alternative, from their perspective, is unthinkable. Now, I want you to think about what this means for you, for your gas prices, for your grocery bill, for your retirement account, for the stability of the world economy. This isn't some faraway conflict that doesn't touch your life. If Israel strikes and Iran retaliates and oil spikes, every single American feels it. Every single person watching this video around the world feels it. And the question is, are you prepared for that? Because I don't think we are. I don't think the markets are. I don't think the governments are. Everyone's hoping it won't come to that. But that hope feels thinner and thinner every day. Let me go back to what Defense Minister Katz said. He didn't just threaten, he gave a warning. He said if Israel comes under fire from Iran, they will respond with full force. That's not a subtle threat. That's a conditional declaration of war. They're saying, you hit us, we hit you, and we don't care who gets in the way. So Iran is now in this tough position. Do they wait? Do they strike first? Do they try to preempt Israel's attack? That's a move Iran might be considering. A preemptive strike by Iran would be devastating. It would force Israel's hand. It would trigger the very response they're trying to avoid. But it might also give them the element of surprise. And here's the twist. If Iran strikes Israel first, Israel would have a casus belli, a justification. The U.S. might be forced to back them publicly, even if they privately disapprove. So Iran's leadership, which is not known for being rational or risk-averse, might actually think that's a good move, because it turns the tables. That's what keeps me up at night, not the coordinated attack, the miscalculation, the accident, the thing nobody saw coming, the one that happens because someone blinked at the wrong moment. I want to talk about the broader geopolitical shift here, because I think it's important. The United States is pulling back from the Middle East. That's not a secret. They want to pivot to Asia. They want to focus on China. They're tired of being the world's policeman in a region that seems to never stop burning. Israel sees that, and they realize they can't rely on the U.S. forever. They have to build their own capabilities. They have to be willing to act alone. And this statement from Katz, it's a test. It's a test of the U.S. commitment. He's saying, we're ready. Are you going to stand with us or not? The U.S. response is, we stand with you, but not on this. That's a problem. That's the kind of answer that creates doubt in an ally's mind. And doubt is the first step toward unilateral action. So let's game out the next few months. Scenario 1. Israel waits. They hold off. The U.S. applies more pressure. Maybe they offer some new security guarantees. Maybe they accelerate the sale of some advanced weapons. Iran continues its nuclear program. Everyone holds their breath. And we do this same dance again in 6 months. Scenario 2. Israel strikes. It's a limited strike. They hit a couple targets. They send a message without causing a full-blown oil crisis. Iran retaliates in a calibrated way, maybe through proxies. It's contained, barely, but tensions remain sky high. Scenario 3. Israel strikes. Iran overreacts. The Strait of Hormuz is shut. The oil markets panic. The U.S. gets drawn in to protect its interests in the Gulf. We're in a regional war. And all of a sudden, the world's attention is completely consumed by a conflict that nobody saw coming in this exact form. Which scenario is most likely? I honestly don't know. And that's what makes this so unsettling. The people in charge, on both sides, are making decisions based on incomplete intelligence, political pressure, personal pride, and a whole lot of fear. That's not a recipe for stability. That's a recipe for a colossal miscalculation. And here's the thing that gets me. The Israeli defense minister basically confirmed that the military is ready to go independent. That's not normal. That's not how these relationships normally work. It means they've reached a point where they're willing to go it alone if they have to. So I want to ask you directly, because I think it's important for you to think about this. If Israel decides to strike, and the U.S. says no, and oil prices spike, and the world economy tanks, who do you blame? Israel for doing what it thinks is necessary for its survival, or the U.S. for failing to stop it? Or Iran for forcing the situation in the first place? There's no easy answer, and that's the point. This isn't a simple story of good guys and bad guys. This is a cluster of competing interests, desperate measures, and long histories of violence and mistrust. And we, the viewers, we're just sitting here trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out what it means for our lives. I think the bigger picture here, the one we should all be paying attention to, is how fragile the global order has become. The oil markets, the alliances, the unspoken rules of engagement, all of it is being tested. And I'm not sure it's passing the test. America's role in the world is shifting. The Middle East is shifting. And Israel, for all its military prowess, is a small country with a lot of enemies. They can't fight everyone forever. No one can. So they're making hard choices. The kind of choices that keep leaders up at night. The kind of choices that lead to wars. And I guess the question I'm left with is, what are we willing to sacrifice? For stability? For security? For oil? For an ally? For a principle? Those are the questions buried under the headlines. And I don't know the answer. I really don't. What I do know is that the next few weeks are going to be critical. The negotiations, the military deployments, the diplomatic back channels. It's going to be intense. And I'm going to be watching it all. I hope you are too. But look, I got to be honest with you. Sometimes I feel like we're all just passengers on a plane, and the pilots are arguing about whether to change course. And we can hear them in the cockpit, but we can't do anything. We just have to buckle up and wait. That's where we are right now. So, let's recap where we stand. Israel has publicly declared its intention to strike Iran's energy infrastructure if needed. The U.S. has publicly declared its opposition. The military is preparing for an independent strike. The Israeli defense minister has drawn a clear line in the sand. And the entire world is watching, hoping, worrying, waiting. This isn't over. It might just be beginning. I've been doing this for a while now, covering these kinds of crises. And I've learned that when leaders start making announcements like this, it's often because the decision has already been made in their minds. They're just preparing the public for what's coming. So I think it's coming. I think Israel is going to do it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And when they do, everything changes. Everything. We're going to be here. We're going to cover it. We're going to explain it. We're going to walk you through every twist and turn, just like we did today. Because I know you want to understand. I know you want to know what's really going on. And that's why I do this. If you got something out of this, if you feel like you understand this situation a little better now, I'd appreciate it if you stuck around. This is exactly the kind of stuff we break down here. The stories the mainstream media rushes past, the details they leave out. So yeah, thanks for listening. Means a lot. We'll talk soon.